They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but mine began on a warm summer morning, with a smell of lake water and old wood. When I first saw the boathouse, it looked like something time itself had forgotten. The roof sagged, the planks leaned at odd angles, and reeds had begun to claim its edges like nature's quiet apology. Most people saw a rotting shack. I saw potential. And more importantly, I saw history. My history. The realtor's face had been polite but doubtful when I told her I wanted to buy it. "So, the structure's over 60 years old," she'd said, shifting her sunglasses up her nose. "It's been condemned twice. The HOA wants it demolished." The HOA, even back then, that word made my stomach tighten. I signed the papers the next day. The first week was peaceful enough. I spent my mornings pulling out weeds, patching holes, repainting the dock. The water rippled in lazy circles, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to contentment. The town was quiet, tucked away from the chaos of city life, and the lake, hidden behind rows of pine and willow, shimmered like glass. But peace never lasts long when greed's involved. The first sign came 3 days later, a white envelope nailed to my door. The HOA letterhead glared at me like an accusation. Notice of violation, unauthorized renovation and occupation of condemned property, lot #17B, Lakeshore Zone. Immediate removal or relocation required. Failure to comply will result in fines and legal action. It was signed by Rebecca Langford, HOA president. I laughed, out loud. Relocate the boathouse? Move it where? Exactly? Onto the water? Still, I figured it was some bureaucratic misunderstanding. So, I went to the next HOA meeting, expecting a rational discussion. What I got instead was a performance, and I was a villain in everyone's story. The meeting was held in the Lakeshore Community Hall, a pristine building with glass walls and expensive decor, all funded by the HOA fees of residents who wanted to maintain neighborhood standards. As I walked in, the chatter dimmed. Every head turned. You could feel the judgment in the air, heavy as humidity before a storm. Rebecca Langford stood at the front, poised like a queen behind her podium. She was in her mid-50s, blonde hair pulled tight, pearls gleaming under the ceiling lights. I'd met her once, years ago, back when my father still lived here. "Mr. Kellen Hayes," she said, her tone sharp enough to slice. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" I set the violation notice on the table. "I came to clear this up. I bought the old boathouse legally. Got the deed, signed, sealed, and recorded. Thought that'd be enough." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rebecca's smile was thin. "Ah, the boathouse," she said. "That structure's been condemned for years. It's a community hazard. You can't just move in and start renovations. It's within our managed zone." "Your managed zone?" I raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure I bought the property outright. It's not under HOA jurisdiction." Rebecca's expression tightened, but she recovered quickly. "The boathouse sits within the lakeshore boundary. Therefore, it's subject to our oversight." I leaned forward. "And the lake? Whose oversight is that under?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. "The lake," she said carefully, "is community property owned collectively by the HOA." That's when I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that made her frown deepen, because I already knew something she didn't. Something my father had told me before he died, a secret buried beneath layers of old paperwork and family silence. My family once owned the lake. All of it. I didn't say anything then. Instead, I let them rant for another 20 minutes, threatening me with fines, eviction, and legal action. Then I thanked them politely, walked out, and drove straight to the county records office. The clerk, a quiet man with half-moon glasses, pulled out the property archives without hesitation. As I flipped through the pages, my pulse quickened. There it was, the original deed from 1949, signed by my great-grandfather, transferring ownership of the land surrounding the lake, but not the lake itself, because that, according to an older document dated 1912, had never been transferred. It still belonged to the Hayes Family Trust. In short, I didn't just own the boathouse. I owned the lake beneath it, every inch of it. The realization hit me like electricity. Rebecca and her HOA didn't have jurisdiction over me. I had jurisdiction over them. Every dock, Every boat, every decorative fountain that extended into that lake rested on my property. And if they wanted to play games, I could play dirtier. But first, I needed proof strong enough to crush them in court if necessary. So, I called my lawyer, old Mr. Pritchard, a man who'd been practicing property law longer than I'd been alive. When I told him what I'd found, he whistled softly. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "That's one hell of a loophole. You sure you want to open that can of worms?" I smiled. They started it. 2 days later, Rebecca came knocking. Literally. I opened the door to find her standing there, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Hayes," she began, voice crisp, "we received reports that you're continuing to make unauthorized modifications to the condemned structure. We're giving you 72 hours to vacate." I leaned against the doorframe. "You sure you want to stick with that story?" Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." I handed her a copy of the 1912 property document, neatly photocopied and highlighted. "That's a record from the county archives. Shows that my family, the Hayes family, retained ownership of the lake and all structures built upon or extending into it, which includes my boathouse." Her face paled. "That's impossible," she said, flipping through the pages. "Possible," I corrected. "And legal." I could see the calculation in her eyes, the dawning realization that the HOA power had just evaporated. But she wasn't the type to admit defeat. "Not yet. This doesn't change the fact that the structure's unsafe," she said, recovering her composure. "We'll have to involve the county safety inspector." "Go ahead," I said, smiling. "But next time your neighbors take their boats out, tell them to ask permission first. Wouldn't want anyone trespassing on my lake." Her jaw tightened. "This isn't over, Mr. Hayes." "No," I said softly, watching her retreat down the path. "It's just beginning." That night, the wind picked up. Rain pelted the water in steady sheets, and thunder rumbled across the hills. I sat on the dock with a mug of coffee, watching lightning flash over the dock lake. The boathouse creaked behind me, old wood shifting, settling, and for a moment I thought I saw movement across the water. Flashlights, faint and distant, bobbing near the opposite shore. The HOA had docks there. I could almost picture Rebecca pacing in her perfect lakefront home, plotting her next move. But she didn't realize yet how deep my roots went here, or how far I was willing to go to defend what was mine. Because this wasn't just about property lines or bylaws anymore. This was personal. They thought they could bully me out. They thought I was some outsider with a crumbling shack. But this lake had a memory. It remembered every secret, every betrayal, every drop of blood that had ever sunk beneath its surface. And if they wanted war, I'd give them one. As the storm raged, I whispered into the dark water, "Let's see who really owns you." The lake rippled, as if in answer. Was it my imagination, or did something move beneath the surface? Something waiting? The next morning, sunlight hit the lake like broken glass. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered. Tree branches scattered on the shore, the air thick with the smell of rain and earth. My phone buzzed nonstop with missed calls and emails from unknown numbers. The HOA had taken the bait. Rebecca Langford wasn't someone who gave up easily. Within 48 hours, she'd filed a complaint with the county zoning board, alleging that my illegal renovations pose an environmental hazard. She also sent a formal cease and desist letter to my lawyer. She'd made her move. Now it was my turn. I started small. The first thing I did was post signs along the shoreline. Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Every dock that extended into the water now had one nailed to it. Every boat tied to a slip had a note taped to the hull. Within hours, my phone blew up again. Angry residents. Confused families. People who suddenly realized that the lake they thought they owned was now off limits. Rebecca called that afternoon. Her voice was sharp as ever, but beneath the surface, I could hear the strain. "Kellen," she said, skipping the pleasantries, "what exactly do you think you're doing?" "Exercising my property rights," I said evenly. "The lake's mine, always has been. I'm just enforcing the boundaries." "You can't do this," she snapped. "People rely on that lake. It's part of the community." "Funny," I said. That same community tried to evict me from my own land. There was a long pause. Then she said, coldly, "You're making a mistake you'll regret." I smiled. "No, Rebecca, I'm making a point." 2 nights later, someone slashed my tires. I found the marks early the next morning, 4 clean slices across the rubber. The message was clear. I didn't bother calling the police. Not yet. I wanted them to feel safe, to think I was bluffing. Instead, I called a surveyor. If Rebecca thought she could bury me in paperwork, I'd drown her in it first. I commissioned a full-scale mapping of the lake, complete with GPS boundaries and historical overlays proving the Hayes family's uninterrupted ownership. Once I had that report, I'd file a notice of trespass for every single dock, platform, and boat resting on my water. The surveyor, a wiry man named Harris, met me at the dock with a drone and a clipboard. "Beautiful spot," he said as he set up. "You planning to develop it?" I chuckled. Something like that. He didn't ask questions, just got to work. Within a week, he handed me a binder thick with evidence, photos, coordinates, maps, and a legal description of every encroachment on my property. When I saw Rebecca's dock highlighted in red, a spark of satisfaction warmed my chest. Her family's prize pontoon boat? Trespassing. The next HOA meeting was chaos. I didn't even have to attend. I just mailed copies of the survey report to every board member and taped one to the community hall door. The fallout was immediate. Residents began demanding answers, furious that their access to the lake was suddenly in question. Some even turned on Rebecca, accusing her of mismanaging HOA funds and failing to verify land rights. Rumors spread like wildfire that the HOA had known about the ownership issue for years, that they deliberately ignored it to maintain control. None of it was true, of course, but I didn't correct them. Why stop a rumor that was working in my favor? By the end of the week, 3 board members had resigned. Rebecca, however, refused to back down. She showed up at my dock one evening just as the sun was setting, wearing her usual pearls and that same self-righteous glare. "You're destroying this community," she said, stepping closer. "Do you even understand what you're doing? Families have lived here for decades. Kids grew up swimming in this lake." "Then maybe they should have respected who it belonged to," I said. She folded her arms. "We can make this stop. We can negotiate. Tell me what you want." The offer was almost tempting. Almost. But revenge isn't about compromise. It's about balance. And she still owed me. "I want the HOA dissolved," I said. "Completely. No more community rules. No more harassment. No more power trips. You'll sign the dissolution papers yourselves." She laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. "You think we'd just hand you that?" "You will," I said quietly, "because by next week you won't have a choice." I spent that night in the boathouse, going through old family boxes I'd found in the attic. Among them were ledgers, maps, and, more importantly, letters. Handwritten letters from my great-grandfather to the town council back in the 1920s, describing an agreement between him and the town's founders. The Hayes family had agreed to allow public use of the lake, but not ownership. That agreement was never renewed after the 1970s, meaning, legally, every dock permit issued by the HOA since then was invalid. Rebecca's empire wasn't just built on arrogance. It was built on air. The next morning, I filed the papers with the county clerk, a formal cease-use order on all unauthorized docks and structures. The moment it was processed, every homeowner around the lake would receive a legal notice, effective immediately. Within 48 hours, it was official. I drove into town for coffee the following day, and the tension was palpable. People whispered when I walked past. Someone spat near my car. Good. Let them hate me. Fear made people careless, and Rebecca was about to make a very big mistake. That evening, I got a call from Harris, the surveyor. His voice was uneasy. Mr. Hayes, you might want to come down here." When I arrived, I saw it immediately, a stretch of the opposite shoreline where fresh tire tracks led down to the water. The ground was torn up, muddy, as if someone had dragged something heavy through it. And floating a few yards offshore was a large wooden dock, Rebecca's dock, now half-sunk and drifting aimlessly across the lake. She tried to remove it before the court order hit, and the thing had snapped free, damaging 2 neighboring docks in the process. I took photos, dozens of them. Then I called the sheriff. By the next morning, Rebecca was facing 2 property damage claims, a trespassing violation, and a court summon for unauthorized construction. Her precious HOA crumbled overnight. The remaining members voted to suspend operations pending legal clarification. In other words, I'd won, but victory didn't feel like I thought it would. The lake was silent now. No children laughing, no boats humming across the water. Just stillness and the echo of my own satisfaction fading into guilt. Had I gone too far? I told myself it didn't matter. They tried to ruin me first. Still, when I looked out across the empty water that evening, I thought I saw movement again, something dark beneath the surface, swirling slowly. The old stories came back to me then, the ones my father used to tell about the lake being alive, about how it never forgave those who disturbed it. And for the first time since I started this war, I wondered, what if the lake remembered me, too? A week later, I got a letter. No envelope, just folded paper shoved under my door. You think you won. But some things you can't own. Kellen. Some things fight back. No signature. But I didn't need one. That night, as fog rolled in across the water, I sat on the dock again, same spot as before, coffee in hand. The boathouse creaked softly behind me. Then, faintly, I heard it, the sound of water lapping against wood, rhythmic and deliberate. I turned my flashlight toward the lake and froze. Rebecca's pontoon boat was drifting toward me, empty. Its ropes had been cut. It bumped softly against the dock, rocking back and forth. The smell of gasoline hung in the air. I stepped closer, and in the beam of the flashlight, I saw something carved into the wood near the bow. We all sink eventually. My pulse quickened. I looked around. The fog was so thick now I could barely see the shoreline. The water beneath the dock rippled, once, twice, then went still again. And in that stillness, I felt it, the weight of the lake watching me, patient and cold. Maybe Rebecca had left a message. Maybe someone else wanted revenge now. Or maybe the lake itself was settling its own score. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not yet.